Thanks for joining us. On today's show, we'll be talking about rolling your 401k into an IRA. And Dustin, when someone leaves their previous employer, that's when you hear about it most. Is that when they usually roll over that 401k?
That is one of the times that I would recommend. And anytime that you can roll over your 401k, we always recommend, I'm not going to say always, we generally will recommend going ahead and rolling that to an IRA. And mainly because, I mean, while you're accumulating, you're during your working years, you're accumulating assets, trying to save money. Mutual funds are probably the best option if you're, putting money in every month. But once you get 50s, 55, 60 years old, now your goals have changed. You're no longer trying to save and be as aggressive as you once were. And a lot of times 401ks may have 10 or 12 different funds, and then as a safe option, they may have a bond fund or they may have a money market. But that may not be the best thing to use when you're trying to be safe with the money either. It can be. It's probably going to miss out on some of the growth that you'd like to see.
It's not very specific to the individual.
Right, right. So if you can roll it to an IRA, the whole world is your option. So
and it's really, you get more control over it that way as well. Instead of just having the choices that your employer pick from, you can invest the money in basically anything.
So you said rolling it over. When other times might I think about that?
Once you reach 59 and a half years old, a lot of people don't realize this, but there's an option called an in-service rollover. And what that means is you're going to keep the plan in service because you're contributing, you're still working, you want your match. But what they allow you to do is most companies will allow you to roll it over into an IRA once you reach 59 and a half.
Now, really, most companies will let you do that?
I would say a significant amount of companies. Wow. I wouldn't say most, but there are a lot of companies that will allow that.
Yeah, what you have to do is check with your human resources department. If you have one, if it's a smaller company, you might not have that. But whoever you go to make changes on your 401k or 403b or to get enrolled in the plan, if you go to them and ask them, are we allowed to do an in-service rollover or an in-service distribution, then they should know what that terminology or what that language means and should be able to tell you yes or no if it's allowed. It's up to the employer when they establish that retirement plan if they were going to allow that to happen. So sometimes individuals will have 401ks with Fidelity or with Vanguard, and they kind of think they've set the rules, and that's not how it works. It's actually the employer that sets the rules.
And on that point, where they may have a 401k at Vanguard, they may have one at their employer they worked at 20 years ago, and they may have a 403b at another company that they work for. A lot of times people feel like that's diversification and that they've got all these different assets working together. But just because you have several accounts doesn't necessarily mean that you have diversification. And what you want to do there is you could typically consolidate those accounts over into one IRA and then start planning for retirement or planning for whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and one of the risks that we come across, fortunately it's rare, but it's pretty painful when it happens, but a lot of people don't realize that if you have, like Dustin just mentioned, a 401k from a previous employer, and you've left it there for years, you just kind of forgot about it, you get a statement on it every once in a while. Let's say something happened to that company, and we would hope nothing ever would, but let's say something did. We saw this a lot during the financial crisis. Let's say that company were to have to file bankruptcy at some point. Most people don't realize it, though. If that were to happen, the assets that you would have in that 401k plan at that time would then be frozen. Okay, so you don't lose the assets, but you can't do anything with them. If you wanted to roll them over, you can't. If you needed to take a withdrawal, you cannot do that. If you wanted to change how the money was invested within the 401k, you cannot do that. The money is basically just stuck there until the bankruptcy proceedings are finished. And that can sometimes take years. So if someone's closer into retirement, it's not the best place to have their money is at their previous employer. If their previous employer is maybe beginning to fall on some hard times, sometimes we know it, sometimes we don't until it's too late. You don't want to get caught in that trap. We saw some of that during the financial crisis where individuals thought, hey, I'm going to be okay, I've got all this money in this 401k, I can get my hands on it whenever I need to since I no longer work at that company. The company then filed bankruptcy and they couldn't touch the money for years. So it's really a big issue. Another big reason why we recommend just rolling money over to an IRA when you're given that opportunity.
And I think sometimes the retirement kind of sneaks up on you, and you've had your 401k going for a while. So even before, long before, say a decade before you might retire, is a good time to go in and look at this and what you're going to do with this money, correct?
Absolutely. Some companies don't even make you wait till 59 and a half. That's kind of a general rule of thumb, but sometimes some companies will just allow at any time to do an in-service rollover. So it's always just important to understand the rules and understand how your plan works, because each one of them are going to be a little bit different.
And not only for yourself, Melissa, but it's also better for your heirs and beneficiaries to inherit an IRA versus a 401k. Again, 401ks can sometimes be very restrictive. The rules and what you can and can't do with that money is really set and established by your previous employer. And some people are okay with that and other people not so much, right? So it's better for heirs and beneficiaries to inherit an IRA and not a 401k. An IRA, you set the rules. You set what happens to that money if something happens to you. It's not up to the standard rules or the standard plan that your previous employer had for you. So,
and can everyone have an IRA? Are there any exceptions to that?
No, you're allowed to have an IRA. Now, some people can't take the deduction, which is one of the benefits, but yeah, anyone can open an IRA.
And we're talking a lot about 401ks, but what we're sharing here today really applies to 401ks, but the same thing can be said for 403bs. If you work for the federal government, you would have a thrift savings plan, a TSP. You know, some will work for local governments. It really is any type of employer plan that you have at a company you no longer work at, or in some cases like Dustin's mentioning, if you still work there, once you start to establish a significant amount of money in these types of plans, you really are better off exploring options and seeing if you can get that money rolled over to an IRA, because it's going to typically save you money and fees. You're going to be able to pick better, more diversified investments, and then it's going to be better for your heirs and beneficiaries, and then you protect the money if something ever happens to that previous employer as well.
So what I'm hearing here today is if you've got a 401k, that's great, and you should be contributing to that because it's free money.
Yeah.
And but you don't necessarily need to stay with it.
Yeah, if I were to summarize it, if you're not, you know, if you are no longer at your previous employer, then I don't think your money should be there either.
That's right.
That's a good way to summarize it.
That's a good point. All right. Thank you very much. And if you would like more information about rolling your 401k into an IRA, you can visit swdgroup.com. And stay tuned for more Strategic Wealth with Matt Dicken right after the break.